Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm author and robot, and today we're going to talk about some more news because there is just an abundance of stuff that's apparently always going on. It's again another collection of things, but enough that I either want to talk about it or I think it's important. Some of these are less so, but you know, we mix the fun in with the less fun because otherwise it's just sad. But before we get started, I wanted to remind everybody, whether you're a returning viewer or a new viewer, hello. We do a thing on this channel called Love 'Em Why. Last month I asked you, and there is a prompt in the description box down below for you to submit anything up to 750 words this coming month, because it's a new year. And this is set for January, and if you submit, you can attach your name to it, and come the first video of the next month, I read your guys' submissions, and we have a grand old time. And the prompt next month is, I think it's pretty freeing. So I mean, check it out, consider submitting, join the fun, patty wagon, as you do. And with that said, let's get into the news. So, one big thing that happened last week is Clive Barker recaptured his Hellraiser franchise rights in the US with a lawsuit settlement. So maybe you may or may not have known this, but for the last while, Clive Barker has not had ownership of Pinhead. Those rights were kind of sold off and being held by somebody else. He has not been behind the Hellraiser movies, just so you know. So a major copyright case has been settled today, and today was December 1st of 2020, as THR brings word that esteemed horror writer Clive Barker has gained the US rights back to the Hellraiser series. Barker leveraged his rights under the Copyright Act of 1976, which allows an author to reclaim the rights of their work from publishers after a wait of 30-plus years. The same copyright law is what currently has the entire Friday the 13th franchise on hold. Luckily, this has resulted in a not-so-complicated ruling for Pinhead over Jason, and will pave the way for new Hellraiser content in the near future. There's been a lot of question about, like, why hasn't Clive Barker made new books, or why hasn't he been using Hellraiser? And if you watched my video before, or why haven't there been any new Pinhead books? If you watched my video before I did on the Scarlet Gospel, you will see that, which was published in 2015, you will see that he did use Pinhead. I don't know under what conditions, but it did not go well. The general consensus of the book was, yikes. Now, I know that there was quite a bit of stuff going on during the making of the book. The book started off, Scarlet Gospel started off very well, very horror, but it kind of just devolved very quickly into what it devolved into. If you want to know my full opinions, head on over to that video at the end of this one to kind of catch up on what that book was about. But a lot of fans felt like, a lot of fans of Clive Barker felt like they had gone to him with the trust that they really liked his work, and they really liked his monsters, and they really liked his world building, and then Clive was just done with Pinhead and pissed all over the memories of it because he just didn't want to work on it. Now, Scarlet Gospel, as far as I know, took about 9 years to actually write, and during those 9 years, I believe he experienced 1 or 2 deaths of people very, very close to him. I think it was 2. And he also, I think he almost died. He went through some very severe health issues. And I think that you can see the way that his life was affecting his writing at the time. And that came out in the novel, and it just wasn't what he wanted to put his heart into at the time. Now, that's just me speculating as a reader, but it was obvious to me that he was not invested in that book. And it was kind of just here's a thing because you're asking for a thing. And it wasn't great. Again, check out the video on Scarlet Gospel if you want to. I loved The Hellbound Heart, and that's what made me want to read more of its books, but after reading the Scarlet Gospels, I was like, I think I could take a break from this. Anyway, what this means is that Barker has regained the rights back to his novella The Hellbound Heart, and the rights to the screenplay of the original Hellraiser movies, officially reclaiming them on December 19th of 2021. And at the time, forcing any new version of the material that is to be made would need to go through Barker and have his involvement. So that means up to this point, the newer stuff has not had any of Barker's involvement or did not require his involvement. Considering that Barker has already signed on to executive produce a Hellraiser TV series for HBO and his termination suit has been settled with Park Avenue Entertainment, it seems like the big screen plans for the series will move along unimpeded. So he's not apparently done with Pinhead, if anybody is a huge Pinhead fan. For reference, Friday the 13th has found itself a similar situation with regards to Copyright Act of 1976, but has its own unique wrinkles. In that case, original screenwriter Victor Miller successfully gained the rights back to his screenplay after filing his own suit, but series producer Sean S. Cunningham has appealed the decision, arguing that Miller was a work-for-hire writer and has no claim to terminate the copyright. To make it even more complicated, many of the elements that fans associate with Friday the 13th, such as an adult undead hockey mask-wearing Jason Voorhees, were not introduced until the sequels. As a result, the courts will need to decide who owns what before the new movie can be made. Hellraiser, on the other hand, already has a new move in the works, with director David Buckner and writer Ben Collins and Luke Piotrowski attached to the project. The TV series also remains a go, with Halloween director David Gordon Green set to helm the pilot and other episodes in the first season. So, moral of the story is be careful when you're selling your character rights. Get a very good lawyer and be very, very careful when you're selling off the rights of what somebody can do with your characters, and if you even own those characters in general. Once you sell your character copyright, obviously it's not the end of the road, but this is a long, hard battle to get your creations back, your IP back, once you've sold them. So if you are in the market for selling them, for selling your characters or your storylines, especially in an epic fantasy world or an epic sci-fi world that is everything that you do, that is a situation you need to be very, very careful in if you're going to sell for TV rights or movie rights or whatever other kind of rights. You can lose control, and then you can just watch somebody destroy all of your beloved creations, and that's the worst. It's one thing to pay for a one-time go or even a one-time story and then just be like, okay, well, I got paid, and if people want the real deal, they can come back to me for the real deal. But when you go this far, it's rough. And I know the emotional attachment and the personal attachment to the characters in the universes, and just to watch somebody continually destroy your beloved creations. Not fun. DC's Starfire has a plus-size goth queer teen daughter, and apparently the Mary Sue is so in love with it. Of course they are. Mary Sue. Do I need to say more? But, DC has decided a couple of years ago that when they were going to go woke, they were going to just destroy everything. And so what does going woke include? It means finding what is beautiful, what is nice, what is unique, what is creative, and designing the opposite of it to destroy that character's legacy and to destroy the character recognizability. We've seen this time and time again with the counterfeits, and every single time the counterfeits don't work. We've got Starfire's new daughter, the queer goth, plus-sized person. Because YA is you've got adults that are writing these things for kids going, this is what kids want, and it's adults who were, and I don't mean to sound like a dick because I was a loser as well, but you've got adults, they're not writing inspiring characters, they're writing characters who lament the people that are the popular people or the gorgeous, everything that they are not. And there's something to be said here as well, and I'm not trying to be especially mean. Like I said, I was a loser, I can admit that I was a loser, but look at this. She specifically inserted herself into this story that was created by somebody else so that she could destroy the legacy, poop on the legacy. She's a counterbalance to Starfire, right? Because you've got the beautiful, tall, whatever, skinny, and then you've got the short, goth, gay reject. And I just mean that in the setup, because obviously this is supposed to be the popular girl who is acceptable, and then this is the counterculture, right? Wasn't that what Raven was to Starfire? So this is not even an original idea for the contrast to Starfire. She really looks like an off-brand Raven, really. And then just apparently is the daughter. The story goes, daughter of Starfire and high school outcast. Also, her name is Mandy Corinder. I couldn't help but think of Billy and Mandy when I saw this, so of course she kind of went more gothic. Mandy is constantly trying to get out from under the shadow of her bright, bubbly, scantily clad, and famous mother, dyeing her bright orange hair black and striking Sticking close to her best friend Lincoln, Mandy spends her days at school avoiding Teen Titans superfans and trying to hide her feelings for her gorgeous, popular, and perfect Claire. And while Mandy usually avoids spending too much time with her alien mother, she's been particularly quiet as she's keeping one major secret from her. Mandy walked out on her SATs. Dun dun dun. This is one of the things that really bothers me, and I had this issue 8 years ago. I still remember this very specific situation, and I see this all the time. Oh my gosh, you've got like this world building in like sci-fi or in fantasy, and you've got all of this fantastical stuff going on. And then somebody just wants to make the plot about, like, pregnancy. You've got this fantastical world, and it's just domestic plot. And why would you create this fantastical world to just have this really domestic, plain, boring plot? I mean, the uniqueness of a story is not in the plot, obviously. It's in the way that you tell the story, but there are so many other things that you could do with this universe. Why would you make a goth social reject who just walked out of her SATs? Like, we're hitting a lot of stereotypes right now. Let's just say. While Mandy continues to tell Lincoln her plans to move to France and to escape the family spotlight and not go to college, she secretly hides a fear of not knowing her identity outside of just being the daughter of a superhero and who she will become. But when she is partnered with Claire, see, I could see this. I could buy into this of secretly not knowing her own identity if she was trying to be her mother, if she copied her mother. But this looks like somebody trying super hard to be like, I'm not like you, but worse. So you remember Good Charlotte's? Ooh, don't wanna be just like you. I could get it if her issue wasn't, well, who am I gonna be outside of, you know, a carbon copy of my mother, because she's not actually acting like a carbon copy of her mother in this. So we're already missing some kind of logic and presentation and storyline plot that doesn't make sense to me. When she's partnered with Claire to work on a school project, their friendship develops into something more, and self-confidence unknown to Mandy begins to bloom. Claire seems to like Mandy for being Mandy, not the daughter of Starfire. But when someone from Starfire's past comes to disrupt Mandy's future, Mandy must finally make a choice. Give up before the battle even begun, or step into the unknown and risk everything. I Am Not Starfire is a story about a mother-daughter relationship, embracing where you come from while finding your own identity and learning to be unafraid of failing, even if it was failing in the first place. So again, like, one, you see a lot of this identity stuff specifically in storytelling, not just for YA, but it's in adults, and I am so tired of identity related stories. There's a place for finding yourself. Growing into your own is a typical YA plotline, and one of the characteristics that defines a YA story is the main character kind of coming into their own and coming into adulthood, basically. But again, down here, you know, it talks finding her own identity. That ties in with the who is she going to be aside from just like her mother. Well, it would work if she was actually just like her mother or some kind of carbon copy of her mother, but nobody would look at this person and think, that's Starfire's daughter. She could easily get away. And maybe that's explained later with why she dyed her hair black and eventually took on this persona to distance herself from her mother. But we're missing, I don't know, we're missing the details that would show the logical conclusions of what she's doing and where she's coming from on all of this. And it just doesn't sound great. But Mary Sue is excited. This is their jam, apparently. Look, you know, that's fine. Whatever. I like to read and write books that are about extremely attractive people. At least mildly attractive people. I've seen that complaint before with, why does everybody in a book have to be attractive? Well, everybody in a book doesn't have to be attractive, but in my books that have romance, I'm going to pick somebody that I find attractive or at least mildly attractive. I'm not going to make an ugly character that falls in love because I'm just not interested in that. But, you know, you do you. If this is what you love, you know, there's always a place for everything. I'm kind of just tired of people taking intellectual properties that aren't theirs and then destroying them, because you could replace this situation with literally anybody else. And again, it's a fantastical situation of being the daughter of an alien superhero, and all you can do is, I walked out of my SATs and I have a crush on my classmate. Okay. But as I tell other people, as I tell everybody, there's a market for anything. If actual Cannibal Shia LaBeouf got 71 million views, then, there is a market, but the question is this market big enough to pay the bills for DC? I think this comes out, I'm Not Starfire is scheduled for release in August of 2021, so we'll see. Another quick comic book update. DC's Plastic Man movie changes screenwriter and will take on a female role. I'm only going to mention this shortly because Comic Pro Ethan Van Sciver did a better video on this, talking about the different ways that this could go, and he's much more familiar with Plastic Man and the comic industry. But I wanted to bring it up for the sheer ability for it to become a counterfeit when it says DC Comics' planned film based on Plastic Man has found a new screenwriter, with the project being described as a prominent female vehicle. Whenever you turn a story into, the purpose of it is to push a political agenda, is to push, be feministic, is to be something bigger than it is, you run into problems. A story should be about the characters and the journey, and you're always going to have the subtext of moral or value or struggle or social justice, whatever. That can all be buried into the story with the values and seeing the characters act. But when you make it such a prominent thing and then you also make it a sales point, it's very offensive, quite honestly. And that's one of my big issues with, oh my gosh, I was going to do a video on freaking Pit Mad, because that happened last week as well. And if you don't know what Pit Mad is a writer's pitching event that takes place on Twitter, where you summarize your story into an elevator pitch, 1 or 2 sentences, and then you hit it with the appropriate hashtags in order to attract publishers and agents on the platform to maybe see your story. And if they like your idea or like your pitch, then they'll invite you to submit a sample of your story. And there are some people that have found agents through this, and there are a lot of people that haven't. And this got me irritated because the new trend is autism. I was looking over the tag, and there were so many that were just using autism as a sales pitch. And this is what it has always looked like to me. So the last couple of years, since I've been paying attention to it, who knows how long far back it's gone, the social justice has very much infiltrated, obviously, the creative industries, and books are not excluded from that. So when you look at Pit Mad, they've got your basic genres for submissions, but then they've had your special extra tags that you could put on, like hashtag me too, hashtag own, which we've talked about here, own voice, which says I have experience of this, which makes me some kind of authoritative voice on this situation. Hashtag something about being an immigrant or immigration. Hashtag there was interracial or multiracial storytelling, hashtag LGBT. So then you could put any of these special interest groups in there that are considered. And I think this year they had neurodiversity, they had mental illness. There was a lot doing hashtag autism. And the most offensive thing about any of this to me, I don't care. Give me your story of all of your different things. I have some very drastically different types of characters in all of my books. But what irritates me about the situation with these hashtags is that you have turned these identities into a trendy sales pitch. You're exploiting, and I don't really often believe in exploitation in storytelling, because I think that anybody can tell any kind of story. But when you use a tag of this story contains black people, this story contains an autistic person, this story contains my personal emotional experiences, you are exploiting different groups and emotions in order to sell your book rather than selling your story based on the merits of the story. And it's cheap and it's disgusting. And I could rant on this forever. I don't know how many other people feel this way. I would rather just know, is this book a sci-fi? Oh, cool. Is this book a dystopian sci-fi? Oh, cool. Now tell me the ideas with the dystopian and the robots and the sci-fi, because I personally love dystopian and robots. Tell me about the idea. When you go dystopian, robots, autism, gay, this other thing, now, if you want to read this because it's got autism and gay in it, I'm out. That is a sales pitch specifically for these groups, and it tells me nothing about if I'm actually interested in the story. So, let me know what your thoughts are on using different demographic groups or different ideas specifically as a, hey, pay more attention to me. Look, I am an autistic, and I put autism in my sales pitch, so you should obviously pay more attention to me because my story is more authentic. Sorry, tell me the actual freaking story. One of my current projects that I'm working on, one of the main characters, or characters that affects the plot, is autistic. I cannot think of any reason whatsoever to put that he is autistic in the title or in the description. I cannot. They don't even, in 1954, which is set in, they don't even have the autistic or autism spectrum diagnosis. That didn't come up until the 90s. So mentioning it in general is inappropriate, but I cannot think of why I'd have to say that he is autistic in order to sell this story. Because I can say the child sees monsters. The child is accused of killing his twin brother, or a child killed his twin brother and is sent to jail and says that monsters did it. And other than that, he's irreconcilable and he can hardly talk. I don't have to tell you that he is autistic. And it feels so out of place and exploitive to go, there is an autistic kid, there is rape, there is mental illness, there is neglect, there is government problems, there's institutional abuse, systemic abuse, whatever. It just feels fake because those have nothing to do with engaging somebody in the plot and only have anything to do with engaging somebody's emotions to get them to respond immediately with emotions. And, maybe that works on everybody else. I can't imagine why it works, but I'm also a robot and I don't respond emotionally to just about anything. So, but let me know what you think. Maybe I'm completely off my rocker and this is the way that you're supposed to market things and, whatever. Maybe if it works, let me know what your hashtags are that would make you instantly pick up a book, because obviously I guess I do fall prey to this when I say robot. I have an in-group preference for books on my people. Getting into some political book news, Stacey Abrams has written 8 romance novels, says New York Times. Now her fellow authors are raising money for Georgia. Now, I want to bring this up. Didn't I call this about a year ago, a little less than a year ago now, when I was covering the RWA shit show, that it was going to become a pack? Now let me tell you what I mean. Alexandra Alter writes, before Stacey Abrams was a prominent figure on the national political stage, she was known to romance readers under another name, Selena Montgomery. Under her pen name Miss Abrams, the voting rights activist and former candidate for governor in Georgia has published 8 romance novels with titles like Reckless and Deception. Now her two worlds are colliding as romance fans and fellow writers have joined her movement to turn out Democrat voters in Georgia's January 5th runoff, which will determine which party controls the Senate. Last month, a group of romance novelists launched Romancing the Runoffs to mobilize Democratic voters in Georgia. Do you want to guess who is involved in romancing the runoffs? Do you want to guess who is involved in turning the romance industry into a pack and the RWA into a pack? I bet you can't guess. The fundraising effort was started by 4 romance novelists, Courtney Milan, Alyssa Cole, and Donna Herron and Bree Bridges. Their initial goal was to raise $20,000 for the New Georgia Project and Fair Fight, 2 voting organizations founded by Miss Abrams and the Black Voters Matters, a fund created to boost black voter turnout. They blew past their goal and have raised more than $460,000. Miss Milan said the project grew out of a text exchange between her and Miss Bridges after it became clear that there would be a Senate runoff in Georgia. To me, this feels so inappropriate because you've got people from outside of the state trying to influence a state election. Again, Georgia politics should be in the hands of the Georgian people, not people from other states funding to have their politics pushed in a state that they don't live in. And I don't say this because I like Brian Kemp. I don't actually like Brian Kemp, and I don't like any of the GOP. I like people who have values that they're willing to fight and stand up for. The GOP are not. And I don't have any problem saying that I think a number of the GOP members are corrupt do-nothings that just want to line their pocket with tax money, okay? So I don't say this for any of those whatever reasons. I think that it is just inappropriate to misuse your position in an unrelated organization and to try to influence local elections in places that you don't live. They were inspired by Miss Abrams' efforts to flip Georgia for Democrats, even after she lost her own campaign for governor, a show of optimism that Miss Milan said typified romance readers' beliefs in happily ever after endings. Why is Miss Milan talking for all romance authors? Inappropriate, Milan, you're not. No. Isn't Courtney from California? What is she doing involving herself in somebody's state elections on the other side and then pretending that she speaks for a wide variety of authors? not all fit romance, especially not all fit her mindset, especially considering they just ousted a bunch of people who do write romance and are trying to blacklist people who write romance for not having the right opinions. Stop it. A big part of it is because Stacey Abrams was so instrumental in establishing a fair fight, Miss Milan said. Someone who sees that possibility for hope and works to make it come to pass is a quintessential romance thing. You could just drown in pessimism, but she didn't. To rally romance readers to organize auction off their more than 3,000 items, including a year-long writing mentorship with the author Anne Aguirre, autographed and annotated copies of novels by the romance writer Tessa Dare, and TV writing consultations with Cheryl L. Anderson, a showrunner for Netflix's series Sweet Magnolias. One of the prized items, a signed hardback edition of Miss Abrams' debut novel, Rules of Engagement, which she wrote while attending Yale Law School. Both Selena and Stacey will sign. Miss Abrams wrote in a tweet endorsing the fundraising efforts, adding a winking emoji. The book sold for $3,200. So again, I think it's abusing your position of power to turn the RWA, the Romance Authors of America, or Romance Writers of America, into a pack. So when is it going to start being treated like a pack? And to those of you who left the RWA last year or got kicked out of the RWA last year because of the whole RWA shit show, you're ahead of the curve because it is de facto a pack according to this. And it's only going to get worse. So time to start something new. Why don't we talk about options in the comments down below about how we can start, some organizations that are actually back about writing and not about influencing elections, and especially not about influencing elections in states that you don't live in. But, what do I know? What could I possibly know? I'm not some lawyer from California. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about today was I've never heard of this author before, but Jess Cluess was dropped by her agent this week because of a spat that she got into on Twitter. And this is the statement from her agent saying that he was dropping her. It was done on December 1st. And he says, Brooks Sherman, where do you work? Agent with Janklo Nesbitt. Never heard of that either. I'm just an uneducated simpleton robot, okay? I need an update. But he said, I thank everyone who took it upon themselves to bring in the recent tweets of my client, Jessica Cluess, to my attention. I also apologize for taking so long to publicly respond, but I felt obligated to speak directly with my client and then gather my thoughts before making any sort of public statement. Oh, I'm so sorry that I actually wanted to talk to the person that people were, telling me things about before I just condemned her publicly. That is such a problem to actually speak to the accuser or accuse it, whatever. Continuing, let me be clear, Jessica's behavior yesterday, in which she made a series of condescending and personal attacks on a Dominican-American woman educator, was deeply problematic and inexcusable. Are you serious? It is yet another example of white privilege and systemic power imbalance that pervades the publishing industry and this country. I care very much for Jessica, and I will also hold her accountable for her actions. I realize that my silence up to now has given the impression that I am indifferent to what took place yesterday, and even that I am complicit. I promise this, and I'm listening, and I'm working to elevate the voices of those who have been historically marginalized in our industry, and I am committed to engaging in the hard conversations needed to move forward together. So number one, condescending and personal attacks on a Dominican-American woman educator. We don't need the qualification of Dominican educator. We also don't need the qualifier of woman, because that would have been an extra if Jessica had been a man. So this is just lining up points to say you're not allowed to talk to people a certain way if they're a certain race or gender or identification. That's wrong, and that shows that Brooks Sherman is actually a racist because he thinks that different people have different rules of engagement based on what their demographics are. He also mentions educator in here, and I don't know why that's important, because for all of humanity, people have always questioned philosophers, educators, doctors. The scientific community is built upon people questioning each other. If nobody ever questioned the scientific community, we might still think the world is flat. So it's okay. This is an appeal to authority saying, well, because she is an educator, she knows better than anybody else. That's wrong. And there are educators who are dumb. that don't know what they're talking about, and it's okay to challenge them. And this appeal to authority to say, well, if they're a higher level than you, then they have more authority than you and they know more than you, is an elitist statement to make us to get on you and try to bar you from ever commenting on anything. If somebody has, I have a master's degree. Okay, master's degree in what? Women's study? Yeah, right. You're smarter than me. Anyway, before we get on to what actually was said and to who and what, really, I just want to take a look at these comments over here where you've got stuff like, what's missing from your statement and how Jessica's statement is how she will be held accountable. This is barely a start. Your client named Lorena and suggested physical harm. We're going to get into that. You need to name Lorena. You need to reach out to her. I cannot move past this tweet in which your client invited a good, decent human who happens to be pregnant to sit and spin on a tech. That is the violence that they're talking about, by the way, that she said sit and spin on a tech. You would think that she threatened to bomb somebody's house. The gross violence of it has washed over me in waves since I encountered it. I cannot fathom the pain and horror of being a victim of this kind of abuse. What kind of plush life must somebody have to think go and sit on a tech is freaking abuse? Come on, are you serious? Committing to hard conversations is the bare minimum. What else? What policies? What practices will you change? So these people hold her accountable for attaching the co-authored statement to the tweet she wrote herself that specifically excludes Black women and women of color she virulently harmed who aren't following her. Mean words aren't violence, okay? Burning down somebody's house is violence. It is insane to me that these people think that mean words are violence and that this is abuse. It's somebody being a dick, and we're gonna actually look at her tweets and you can tell me if it's abuse or kind of somebody being a dick, because I have seen worse come out of Stephen King's mouth. I have seen worse come out of Adam Baldwin's mouth. I've seen worse come out of a lot of people's mouths than go and sit on a tack. But they want action, they want retribution, they want somebody to be punished, they want a public flogging, if you will, so that people who say stuff like Jessica never feel safe enough to say stuff like Jessica ever again out loud. So what all really happened? This is all, so Lorena, we got, the communist fist right here. What happened was Lorena's against classical books being taught in school or being read in school. She wants them replaced with not classics, with more contemporary. I think this was the tweet that started it, where Lorena says, did y'all know that many of the classics were written before the 50s? Think of the U.S. society before then and the values that shaped this nation afterwards. That is what is in those books. That is why we gotta switch it up. It just ain't about being old. So she's just calling all classic American novels, and not even American novels. We can go back into European novels. We can go back into, Plato and the philosophers and the big writers of the Western world, and she's just going to call them all racist. I wonder why she might call books written about the West racist and want them all replaced with books written by her peers. I wonder what's at play here. What I want to get into are there are a lot of people right now, especially in this last week or two, that I have seen making huge statements about how the classical literature of the Western world is outdated and all of it needs to be gotten rid of, and we need to just remove all of it because it's not fun to read. Nobody wants to read it in schools. Like where Rosie Thor here says, thinking about what classic novel turned you into a writer tweet that I'm not going to retweet just to dunk on it, but what turned me into a writer? The Lioness Quartet by Tamora Pierce. The classics made me feel stupid and bored. Fantasy made me feel inspired. Look, there are different reasons to read different books. Not every book is going to be fun to read, and I even remember this in graduate school. Yes, because I have a master's degree. Where the teachers, professors said, and at least one of them was a PhD. I'm pretty sure she's the one that said this too. You should finish books that you don't enjoy because you will always learn something from them. Not every book is going to be fun to read, and there are those candy stories or those more fun leisure stories that you are going to read for your leisure, for your fun, and that will inspire you. But classic novels, philosophical works, historical fiction works, historical fantasies are going to teach you something else. They're going to teach you about a time, about a person, about a philosophy of the writer. And there's this obsession that bothers me so much. And I'm going to call you an ableist if you're one of these people that goes, well, that's your problem. And there is this obsession right now in the writing community. I've seen it a lot with agents, and then I've seen it with authors, whatever, with this obsession that you have to personally connect with the character so that you can cry with the character. I don't feel that. You know why? And because I'm on the spectrum. Ableist, if you make fun of me. But they all feel like they have to be personally entertained at every section of every day, and everything should be easy, and it's just lazy. You can enjoy a book, but a book for pleasure or for leisure is completely different than a book that is harder to read, or a book that you disseminate, or a book that you're going to read multiple times. Every time I go to a used bookstore, you know what mostly makes up the shelves? Romance books that are all about the candy. Now, that's not to say that romance books can't have something deeper within them, but a lot of romance books are a one-time read. Every book does not have to be easy and quick and just this zero effort to read. You challenge yourself and you learn how to read better and you learn how to read deeper by reading those harder books. And this right here with Rosie Thor just sounds lazy. But there's value in the contemporary books and there is value in the classic books, and they have different purposes. They will teach you different things. They will inspire you in different ways, and you don't have to like every book that you're going to read. If you had to enjoy everything that you did in school, there are very few, there are already very few that make it through college, but you don't enjoy everything that you do. You don't enjoy everything that happens at work either. So push yourself a little more, and if you feel stupid, it means that you need to read probably more of those classical books. I have books where I'm like, I don't get this. Free and Ferdinand is over here because the first time I read it, I was having such a hard time reading. I had been on a reading drought for years before I started picking up literature again, and after being back on the reading horse, I can, read better and deeper. I still can't understand everything, but I have to push myself to read harder texts in order to understand harder texts. And that's not to say that then there's not a place for easier texts. There's a spectrum of availability for everything. So anyway, getting off this hatred of classical literature, what did Jess actually say? These were the tweets. I don't know what fully they were in response of because they're all deleted now, but down here at the very bottom, it's got the tweet from Lorena German about the stories being written in the classic, before the 50s, and how they're all racist. So Jess Cluess said, "This anti-intellectual, anti-curiosity bullshit is poison, and I will stand here and scream that it is sheer goddamn evil until my hair falls out. I don't care. If you think Upton Sinclair was on the side of the meatpacking industry, then you're a fool and should sit down and feel bad about yourself." I don't know why these are underlined because, again. Yes, that embodiment of brutal subjugation and toxic masculinity, Walden. Sit down and spin on attack. Remember how Louisa May Alcott wrote Little Women to uphold the patriarchy? If you do, stop taking drugs, you hack. John Steinbeck, writing with sneering disgust about agricultural laborers in The Grapes of Wrath and of Mice and Men, is what I would say if I were a so-called educator who was in fact a charlatan. Remember the horrible lessons learned from The Wizard of Oz and its total dearth of interesting female characters? Then be honest, you haven't read it, you tool of idiocracy. Yes, their eyes were watching God and other literature of the extraordinary Harlem Renaissance? I guess not, dick. If you think Hawthorne was on the side of the judgmental Puritans in The Scarlet Letter, then you are an absolute idiot and should not have the title of educator in your bio. This thread is for you, Nena German. I hope that you sit with this. I hope it embarrasses you. It's only what you deserve. So, this is what has caused Jess Cluess to lose her agent, the backlash, and a bunch of people to call her racist. Is this racist? No. Is this abrasive? Yes. Is this kind of rude? Yes. You got sit on attack, you dick. Calling people names is not really the educated. What is it? The more refined, I guess, way to do things, though. If we go back, people were taking off gloves and slapping people in the face and then having a sword fight. So that was a way of dealing with problems before. But is this racist? No. It looks like a fundamental difference between the reading of literature between one person that's completely misrepresenting and completely misreading literature and then saying it's because it's all racist and misogynistic and it needs to be gotten rid of so that you buy her peers instead, and she hates the culture that it all comes from, so you need to buy her stuff instead. And then you've got another person saying there is value in these and you're misreading them and you're mischaracterizing them. And if this is what you're teaching in your classrooms, I don't think that you're fit to be an educator. And I can agree with that. If you look at classic books and you say this is just misogynistic and patriarchy pushing and all of this was written with evil, then you're not actually reading these books, or you haven't read them at all, and you're making a generalized statement based on the time period in which they were written. I don't necessarily think that Jessica is wrong in her statements, but I don't think that she needed to be so abrasive and insulting, because you really don't you don't convince people to your side by doing that. But then I think she was also weighing that she's not going to be convincing Lorena German to her side anyway, in the same way that none of these other people care about showing Jess any compassion or mercy, because they don't really care about bringing her over. They just want to make an example out of her so that people don't act like she does. I did find a little bit of hope in this thread between some of the things that people were saying, though it looks like even now some of them are getting downvoted for this. But Laszlo Egri says, don't get worked up over this. The target of the author's racist tweets is not directed at the thoughtful academic making observations. She's an active propagandist for the equity movement and a racist herself. As Kamala Harris explained, equality is about giving everyone an equal start, but because the poor always start lower, they will always finish lower. Equity is about assuring everyone is at the same end. Communism at its clearest definition. While the agent is obviously a suck-up of political correctness, she's also a supporter of BLM, and he crossed the agent line. The agent always supports the writer and free speech. Here he has damaged the reputation of the client and engaged in censorship based on his opinions. Even the convicted murderer Ann Perry has an agent. She was guilty of a real crime but served her sentence. Authors are notoriously cranky and run off at the mouth all the time. Being a jerk is not a crime, and this is completely true. I also think that agents should not try to ethically line up with everything that their author does, because again, you're setting this example. So then if a murderer could get a book deal, but somebody who shoots off at the mouth like Jessica or even Stephen King, but nobody's going to drop Stephen King because he makes too much money. But if somebody just being kind of a jerk is enough to make you drop them, but you're going to take a murderer on, what am I supposed to think about you as an agent and your morality? And you're willing to trade anything that you say is a value for money. And then you've got another up here that said, from Padfoot 1989, that said, I've deleted my Twitter. Unless you're going to go along with whatever cancel culture forces you to say, you have to deal with crazy life-altering repercussions. It's not a platform for meaningful discussion, which is actually how people change minds and hearts. It's just a soapbox for bullies who think that they are better than everyone else and want to force everyone to agree with them publicly. I'm afraid to make jokes about the weather for fear of people being offended that it's not the right time or place to speak, and there's agreement there. So there are people who don't agree with this, who are fighting back, and who find this all ridiculous, but instead of really publicly fighting back, a lot of people are just kind of checking out, which makes the mobs grow bigger and the defense grow smaller for these types of things. But that is the situation. I had no idea who Jess Cluess was before this. I had no idea who Lorena German was before this. But people getting canceled for their crappy opinions or being a jerk is kind of dumb, especially considering how many jerks I have run into in the writing industry. But you know, that's just me. I'm a robot. What do I know? Let me know what your opinions are on any of this content in the comments down below. If you enjoy this sort of thing, please like, share, subscribe, share your entertainment-related stories or your community-related stories if you'd like me to cover them in a future video. And until next time, thank you so much for watching. Appreciate you. And subscribe, please. I need you. I don't know. I think that's all I gotta say. So, have a good one. And, don't die. Dear Madam Astra, that's me. We regret to inform you that on August 1st, your employer, Agatha Jane Benedict, owner of the Benedict estate, peacefully passed away in her sleep. Oh, that's so sad. Wait. Let me try that again. Oh my goodness, that's so sad. Yeah, I think I'm ready. With millions of dollars on the line and the opportunity for your every need to be taken care of for life, tell me, is there anything more valuable than that? Dead End Drive is a dark comedy novel that makes 3 promises. 1, an illustrious estate in Louisiana. 2, an opulent dinner affair for all in attendance. And 3, and most importantly of all, lots and lots of competitive murder. So if you're looking for a cozy book to settle in with for the spooky season, I've only got one question for you. Will I see you at the whale reading?